We have two gentlemen here, Andy Noguchi and attorney Josh Kaizuka. Both of these gentlemen are with a tremendous organization that has been a big leader in our community here in Sacramento. We're very proud to have the opportunity to welcome them to Family Matters. And as I mentioned before, one of the things that's most noteworthy with the Florin Japanese American Citizens League, or JACL. JACL is a national organization, and this is the Florin chapter. This is the anniversary of one of the most infamous cases in American history, and I know that our attorney who is here in the studio can relate to this. I wrote an op-ed piece that was published in the Fresno Bee about how the president is emasculating the judiciary daily with the comments and the criticisms and all the other things he's doing. But there are two cases in American history, in my opinion, that were the worst of all time. Dred Scott v. Sanford, which basically said that even though Dred Scott had gained his freedom by leaving the state of Missouri, as soon as he stepped his foot back in Missouri, he was a slave again, according to that Supreme Court and that Chief Justice. And the infamous African Americans are only worth 3/5 of a human being came through that case. And then the other horrific case was Korematsu versus the United States. So we're at an anniversary period of that infamous case. Maybe we can start with that. What do you gentlemen think about that case or about the legacy of Korematsu, particularly in this day and time?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting us, and thank you to your listeners. Korematsu is an important case. Basically, with Executive Order 9066, we're talking about something, as you said, 75 years ago, just a week ago.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm at a point where I'm kind of at a loss to find out what it is about this day in time, where we're hearkening back to what happened 75 years ago. And really, it comes down to warmongering, racism, and lack of political leadership.
Let me ask you a question. Have either of you seen the play Allegiance by any chance? Have you heard about it or seen it? Talk about it. I had the pleasure. I have a nephew, Chris Lee, who is Chinese American, went to Kennedy High School. My dear, dear, sweet nephew. I say sweet, he's a grown man now. He's 40 years old, but to me, he's always a kid.
Yeah, he's older than you.
That's right. Thank you, Richard. But he took me to go see Allegiance. He is an actor in New York now. He's left Sacramento. He's a very successful actor and dancer. He took me backstage to meet George Takei. I was very proud of that. And the play captures the essence of what you just said, Counselor. America needs to wake up. This is everybody's issue. It's not one community's issue. It was Japanese Americans, and we're talking about full citizens, folks. We're not talking about people who are here on either an undocumented basis or a temporary visa basis or waiting to get in line to become a citizen basis. These were Americans who were full citizens who were rounded up and in literally the dark of night in some cases were taken to some abhorrent places. And the play Allegiance on Broadway captures this and talks about it. What do you think about the play, about that whole travesty and its applicability to today? What do you think?
Well, we really like the fact that Allegiance is out there educating the public, making people aware of things, getting people involved in those issues, because those are issues that face us today. You know, and people don't realize that a lot of folks think that, well, you just kind of silently went off to these World War II concentration camps. This is a whole wave of racial terrorism against the people.
Well, slow down, slow down.
Yeah.
We like to capture certain terms.
Right.
Richard has some. He's the wordsmith among us. But you just said racial terrorism. We have a predominantly African-American group of listeners, but not exclusive. We have Latinos, we have Caucasians, we have Asian Americans, we have Muslims, we have Christians, we have a wide spectrum. Tell us what you mean by that term that you just used. You didn't do that willy-nilly. You used those words specifically. What did you mean by that?
Definitely. When you look at the whole situation there, we found out in recent years that there was 10 years of government surveillance on Japanese American communities since the early 1930s.
I did not know that.
Before people were rounded up in the dark of night in many cases. 17,000 people were arrested right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Those were community leaders across the West Coast, including Buddhist priests, newspapermen, journalists, teachers, cultural arts leaders, and they were taken away, and the families never knew what happened to them until weeks or maybe months later.
Yeah, you guys mind if I call you by your first name? Now, I'm old
go
school,
ahead.
so I usually call people by their last name until they tell me I can call them by their first name. But I feel like kinfolk with y'all already.
I'm Andy.
I'm Josh. I'm Josh.
Here we go. So, who was the president during that time?
That was President Franklin D. Roosevelt.
President Franklin Roosevelt, who on his watch, carried out by Harry Truman, but on his watch also authorized the bombing of 2 Japanese cities with the worst, most horrific weapon in the history of humankind, correct?
Right.
All right. Now,
Right.
here's why I say this. This isn't Democrat or Republican. This isn't progressive or conservative. I'm done with all that. I'm done. If nothing else happened, and I'm a kid who was a junkie for politics, I watched conventions. I consider myself, as I say, a Democrat by habit. By habit. Served in the Clinton administration and the Davis administration proudly. But, you know, understand that the crime bill was passed during the Clinton administration. That the bill that deregulated the finance industry, which led to the complete crashing of the American economy, happened during the Clinton administration, and on and on and on. We can't be smug that because we're Democrats, that can never happen. I'd never support that. Well, in 1940, 41, 42, 43, 44, and 45, I got to believe there were a lot of Democrats that endorsed and embraced this philosophy of rounding up Japanese Americans and relegating them to concentration camps. What do you think, Josh?
Of course, that happened. I mean, you look back at the pictures and the newspaper articles from back then, and it didn't matter what your political affiliations were. The government was telling you, this is the enemy. They look like them. And you saw, looking at the archives, signs and graffiti, Japs go home, right? But these were American citizens. They were born. 120,000 Japanese Americans were rounded up and sent to 10 different concentration camps.
That's what they were.
Yeah.
They were horrific conditions. Did the Japanese Americans who were rounded up that way ever get their property back? Their real estate, whatever investments they had, did they get all that back? I mean, it was kind of like our bad, right? It was when the war was over, they embraced everybody and said, "It's okay, we're going to reimburse you plus."
Oh no, it's worse than that.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Andy.
Well, about 80 to 90% of the people who lost their homes, lost their farms, lost their businesses, never had a chance to get that back. For a lot of the farmers out there, people were getting ready to harvest their crops in the springtime. You know, they're paying off their mortgage because of the profits from those crops.
That's right.
They got shipped out in the springtime. So because of that, people never had a chance to even, protect their property and have something to come back to. There were a few instances, a gentleman named Bob Fletcher, Caucasian farmer, who took over the farms of 3 of his Japanese American neighbors, and he took care of everything for those years, saved the money, gave folks their money when they came back. They had a home to live in.
Wow.
And it's just amazing people like that I think, we take pride in.
And that gives us all hope. Richard, what do you think?
Well, I have 2 questions, but I want to start, Mark, by personalizing this. We have somebody in our studio, Andy Noguchi, who was personally interned himself. And I think we need to, hear that story. Could you tell our listening audience about your experience? As I understand that you were in the internment camp at 7 years old. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, I must look older than I am. I'm one of these baby boomers.
Was something in the paper about that, okay?
Yeah, I think sometimes you can't trust the
We know
Well,
that.
we learned that alternative facts.
So tell us
out
what
there.
the truth is.
Well, my family members
Okay.
were all locked up in the camps in Tule Lake and other camps.
Yep.
Okay.
And except for my father. My father was serving in the U.S. Army at the time, and he ended up volunteering for the Military Intelligence Service. And I'm proud that he fought against Japan, because Japan was a fascist country, attacking the world with the Nazis and the fascists from Italy at that point. But so my older generation relatives all went through that
And
themselves.
let me pause. If I remember correctly, I think Bob Matsui and his family were interned. And I'll never forget the late Bob Matsui, the former congressman whose widow, Doris Matsui, now serves in the Congress. I was very close to then Congressman Matsui, the late Congressman Matsui, and I remember him saying, with all the success that I've had and all the things that I've achieved, including being elected to the United States Congress, that still burns deep in my soul. As we think, well, that was then, and we're better now, when we watch the efforts of this president, my students who are listening in, and they're listening in because they have to. I assigned to my 250 students that they got to listen to this show, so it's not like they think Professor Harris is all that fly. I gave them an assignment in my law class for them to go into constitutional research, and one of the cases they researched was the Korematsu case. And one of the real travesties, Richard, is the case has never been corrected. There were efforts to correct it. I know Judge Patel, who was part of the Central District in California. I was the law clerk in the Central District right out of law school. Judge Patel kind of modified this through a special order, but neither Korematsu nor Dred Scott have ever been officially overturned. So theoretically, if not technically, this president, number 45 as some refer to him, could drive literally a truck through that and do something similar to African Americans, Muslim Americans, Japanese Americans, any number of folks. What do you think about that, Josh, as a lawyer?
Well, let's step back to the campaign. This rhetoric about banning Muslims, banning people from the Middle East, started during the campaigns. And what kind of rhetoric was going on? People were actually citing Executive Order 9066 as the way to get it done. Hey, we've done it in the past. We can do it again.
Ouch.
And here we are. You know, JACL has stood by year after year telling the story so that things like this don't happen again. But here we are, right back at it.
Well, and I tell you one thing that impressed Richard. I'm going to give Richard his props. Several months ago, Richard shared with me your letter of support for LEAD in what we were trying to do to get justice for the Flanaugh family and the Mann family. You guys stood right with us. Let me read what it says for your chapter's mission: promoting civil rights, social justice, and cultural heritage for all Americans through community education, alliances, and leadership. Man, that's good. There's nothing better than that. I don't know how you can improve that. Andy, what do you think about that? How did you come up as an organization with that focus for your chapter?
Well, I think we learned through our history, going through the tragedies before, and then understanding and having the compassion for others. We know it's vital to be standing up for others today. So that includes the African American community, Latinos, immigrants, Muslim community, LGBTQ communities. You know, when people are being treated unfairly, we all need to speak up. We need to stand up. We need to come together. And that's the way we're going to have the power, you know, in order to try to change things. And that's our mission.
You know, Mark, it brings me back to your question that you had for the mayor. And his question to the mayor, I don't know if you heard it, was many in the black community, unfortunately, feel as though this is not their issue, that if they came here illegally, hey, they ought to go back and get in line and do all that kind of stuff. What would you say to people who think that way? Because I've got an answer for them, but I'm just curious, based on your own experiences, what would you tell any other ethnic group? You kind of answered it just then, but expand on it. Any other ethnic group that takes that position?
Beautiful question.
Well, I'd say, well, where did your family come from? Unless you're a Native American,
Let's
you
start
came
with
from
that.
somewhere
Let's
else.
start with that.
You know,
Yeah.
whether it's free or for like immigrants from Asia, or whether it's being forced, like slaves from Africa. You know, we all came from other places for the most part. And it's important for us to realize that and appreciate that, and to look around and see how each one of us, each one of the communities has contributed to our country, made it as strong and as important as it is today.
I want to recommend something to you two gentlemen. I've shared it with Richard. There's a book you may be familiar with already called The Warmth of Other Suns. Yes. And it's an amazing book that chronicles the migration for African Americans. Richard and I are both the products of families that migrated, in my case, first from the South, Mississippi, to the Midwest, which was equally Southern and racist, the city of St. Louis, and then ultimately to California. And what I tell my students is, I'm an immigrant. I'm a product of immigrant parents, all intra-United States. But my parents started in Mississippi with their parents, immigrated collectively to St. Louis, then immigrated to California in the great African-American migration of the 50s and 60s. And so, you know, before people start jumping to a point where they're finger pointing or talking about how this doesn't relate to them, I like what Andy just said. Every one of us comes from an immigrant community. And a lot of us, it was not as far away as we might otherwise think. What do you think, Richard?
No, I think you're dead on. And keep in mind also that 99% of African Americans that migrated were farmers, agriculture workers, cotton pickers.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
so let's not forget that. We were in the same boat.
Right.
And now we're all in the same boat, literally.
Right.
Right? But my question for you all is that, so we're in this real difficult moment in our history. I've said it on the show, Mark is a little nicer than me, but I think we have
Today.
Yeah, we have in my view, a white nationalist shadow government in the United States. Steve Bannon, Steve Miller,
Yes.
the whole Breitbart
Yeah.
crew. I mean, they parked themselves in the White House. Combine that with the appointment of all the billionaires and Wall Street people who corrupted our economy in the first place. Now they're back in power. So here we are. How has your mission and your organization's mission changed in response to what we're seeing now? Do we have to retool, re-engineer how we go about our business? Do we have to become even more active than what we are right now?
Well, I think we all have to stand together. Doesn't matter whether you're black.
Right.
Doesn't matter if you're Asian. Doesn't matter if you're Latino. We all have to stand together. And if we all stand together to fight against injustice, we can win. Right? That's what happened during the Civil Rights Movement. And, Asian Americans, especially Japanese, are very proud that the black community came together because the civil rights that Martin Luther King fought for actually came down to us as well.
Right. It's great. It's great to see an acknowledgement. That's the other thing that a number of African Americans are sensitive about is they don't feel in some cases that other groups that have benefited from the struggles of African Americans and others acknowledge that. Just acknowledge it, not defer to it. I grew up in, as Richard says, Southwest
No,
Central.
kind of.
Southwest Central. I grew up in the Crenshaw district in LA. And in my neighborhood, there was a very strong bond between Japanese Americans and African Americans because Japantown was Crenshaw. And so, the segregation patterns in Los Angeles linked the African American community to the Japanese American community by necessity because there were those patterns of racist policies associated with where people could buy their homes. So I was blessed to grow up in a neighborhood that quite honestly had no white folks, but had Latinos and had Asian Americans, particularly Filipino Americans and Japanese Americans, and I feel culturally benefited from that experience. Richard is saying something, though, that I really want to kind of go half a tick back to. And that is, what do we do? What's the game plan today, particularly as we're dealing with the multi-generational aspects? He says I'm kinder. This is all I say. I respect the office of the president. I still do, even though it's very difficult right now in light of who this president is.
You're coming around.
You're right that Bannon and Miller in particular trouble me because they are avowed racists. They are avowed white supremacists. They are. There's no question. They acknowledge it and they're proud of it. If you bring those people into the White House, the association's pretty clear to me. You can't bring somebody in who believes in white supremacy and say, that ain't you. So I'm with Richard. But what message do we give to young people when we disrespect the office of the presidency, when we demean the president by name or disrespect the office or whatever it is? What are you telling young people in the Japanese American community about that?
Well, I think we need to respect the office, but we need to tell the difference between who's occupying and what they're doing versus what the office is and what it should stand for. We're trying to get a lot of young people involved and trying to develop leadership that's very important for the future. As far as like speaking out and doing something, a week ago we had a special Never Again program. We brought together almost 200 people from the Japanese American, Asians, very diverse interfaith community, Muslim community, to try to organize. That's what we need to do. Besides speaking about the past, we need to come together, we need to get involved, and I also have to mention where people need to get involved politically. There's going to be some changes that need to take place on that stage and all, too.
I like that, man. That come together theme is a nice theme. Josh, what do you think?
Well, Florin JACL has been really good at trying to promote our youth, to get them engaged. And in times like this, it makes it a little bit easier for us because we have our youth leaders, some over at UC Davis, who actually organized a Never Again type of event on campus. And usually student groups, they put on an event, maybe 20, 30 people show up. We went there to support them. They filled an entire classroom.
Oh my gosh.
It was unbelievable. And the diversity in the classroom was just great. We had Muslims, we had Caucasians, we had Asians. It really fit together. And I think trying to teach the youth, and many of them don't learn about the Japanese American experience in high school, in college.
That's right.
Right? I mean, I didn't learn about it in high school. Not at all.
You know, it's funny. You're saying some things that I'm thinking about. Richard, here we go. So I know there are callers who want to call in. We're going to take your calls in about 3 to 5 minutes. Give us just a little bit more time. We're going to go to commercial as well. But when Allegiance comes to San Francisco, and I don't know that it has come already. I know that it was on Broadway when I saw it not long ago. But when it comes to San Francisco, and it will, I would love to take a group of African-American kids to go see Allegiance, because this is not taught in the public schools effectively. There are a number of kids, Latino, African-American, and other cultures, possibly even within Asian American cultures, who don't know the history of what Executive Order 9066 was all about. And the fact that it could come back again, probably at no time in our recent history have we come as close to what led to the dynamics that ultimately manifested themselves in Japanese internment as we are right now. So I'd like to talk to you guys about that, is maybe sponsoring a bus trip or something.
Together.
Increased knowledge is a good thing. I think through increased knowledge and familiarity will come strength. And so I hope you guys will consider that.
Well, also, we might as well stop at Angel Island. Take a look at while we're doing it, right?
Right.
Let's don't just go see a movie. Let's go to the island and see some of the internment facilities that they had on Angel Island on the way to San Francisco.
That's a great idea.
And I've got some Bebe's kids for you too.
Richard always bringing these.
Put your watch up.
These hide your jewelry. Hide your jewelry. Richard,
they're hungry.
What do you think? We're going to commercial in a minute. If there are any calls, we're going to open the phone lines now, so you can give us a call here at the studio, and we'll put you right through. We're going to commercial, as I mentioned, in just a couple of seconds, and we've got to make way in about 30 minutes for the Grammy Award winner, Jay King, who will be doing his show, Traffic Jam, from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. if he's in town. If not, the big homie Eric Dostey will be taking over. Here's a caller. This is KDEE 97.5. Who's this?
Hey, good afternoon. This is T.A. Scott. How you guys doing?
Oh, my God. Mr. Scott, how come you're not in studio with us, man? This is one of our colleagues. He's one of our guest hosts who's away today. What do you think of Mr. Scott?
Hey, I just want to say, as usual, man, you and Richard are holding it down. You guys are representing. I enjoyed the mayor's comments, and I'm really, really getting into the gentleman that you're speaking with right now in terms of the history of the Japanese experience. And so just appreciating the call for unity.
Thank you.
And everybody striving to kind of realize who we're dealing with in the big house.
Go ahead, brother, man. We miss you, Mr. Scott. We want you to come back and join us. Mr. Scott comes in. He's a former employee, proud Teamster with UPS for 32 years, Mr. Scott?
32, man.
I'll never forget that.
I call myself the blue-collar rebel.
I like that, man. But we'd love to have you back in the studio, man, and thank you for calling in. We appreciate you, Mr. Scott.
I'll be in there next Wednesday.
We'll look for you, man.
Take care.
Take care.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
What do you think? I think that the message of unity reverberates through our entire community. When we were going through the throes, and we're not finished, but when we were going through the throes of the Mann and Florin matters, I tell you for a fact the Florin matter's not over, because I'm the family's attorney, and I just gave them an update yesterday. But the Mann case has reached a financial settlement. The issues still remain. What would you gentlemen say in terms of a message that you might deliver of how we can improve our community through unity when it comes to particularly the police department and our relationship with law enforcement? What do you think about that?
Well, the city council did take up some steps, initial steps, to try to, get some transparency going, maybe some civilian oversight.
Yes.
And it's a good start, but it's not there. It's not like in San Francisco where there's a complete civilian oversight committee.
Yes.
And they have the power to actually do investigations.
Let me stop you for a second, if I can, Josh, because I need your help. I'm asking, and I'm going to connect with you. Lead was able to retain the law firm Gibson Dunn out of Los Angeles. You're familiar with Gibson Dunn, one of the biggest, most prestigious law firms in the country, if not the world. They're our counsel, and we have deliberately let the relationship we have with them pause for a minute as we move through potential settlement discussions with the city on behalf of the Flanor family and the Mann family. We've now come through that process to a point. The Flanor family will continue their efforts to get justice. The Mann family, at least relative to the case, will be finished with that for now. But here's the point. The point is, Gibson Dunn just asked me yesterday, Richard, and I talked to Richard about it. Were you ready to get back in the ring? Where are we going? Or we hit the pause button because the city, to their credit, took a good set of steps back in November. Right. We all agreed, and we stood, as I'm sure you guys did, in support of that as a starting place. But we really need to get to what you said. Number one, what is it the city can do? What is it the city will do? What is it the city can't do by law or case or by statute or case law ordinance or whatever? And what is it that the city is just saying, we could do it, but we're not going to do it. Could do, but not going to do, or will do, or won't do. We need to know those four things. Will you assist us, Josh, in terms of your legal role? I can't ask you to commit the organization, you and Andy, because I know you have a process. But we hope you will continue, because the discussion has to be bigger in the room than just Richard and I and lead. It's got to be a bigger reflection of the broader community. Would you consider you and Andy joining with us in our next level of efforts as we move forward?
I'd be happy to.
Good.
This is certainly an important issue for the city of Sacramento, not just the city of Sacramento. If we can come up with something good,
Yes.
then it turns into something for other communities.
Absolutely right.
Right? And if we can do it right and be on board, other communities will follow.
Marcellus McCrae is the lawyer who's the lead counsel for Gibson Dunn on this. The former U.S. attorney from the Eastern District is at Gibson Dunn. He's involved with this, representing us. These are very prestigious, powerful folks. For those of us who are lawyers, and for Andy and Richard as well, you know the power and the influence these gentlemen have. What Josh just said is the leading edge to this whole thing, and that is, we've got to make sure that whatever we get that will become the model in Sacramento can be replicated in other communities, that it's good enough to go potentially statewide, if not nationwide. That's why I'm still involved with this, and that's why Richard's involved. We could say, we had a great victory in November, we got some changes, we're done. This isn't our full-time gig, but the hope that we can create a model that can be replicated is why we're in this. What do you think, Richard?
I think that's right. Just the fact that San Francisco has an independent body, and then to hear our city council say that that's not possible in this governance framework is a little bit insincere, I think. So, I think what they're claiming is that, Mark, we're going to have to change the city charter, or we're going to have an election to do that. So they're kind of forcing us to raise money and do that kind of thing in order to put it on the ballot. What do you think about that?
Well,
Could we win something like that?
Well, let's
Or
step
do we
back.
even need to go there? Right.
Yeah, let's step back. Remember at the end of that council meeting where they said, hey, here's what we're going to do?
Yes.
Right.
There were all these different questions being asked of the city attorney, right?
Right.
And those are the exact same questions.
Right.
Can we do it? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Our charter's not the same, San
Right.
Francisco,
Right.
right? And so I think then Mayor Johnson
Yeah.
asked that he check and see what can be done. What are the alternatives?
And they haven't done a thing.
How
I'm
many
just
months
saying,
later?
I'm going to call him out. The city attorney, I'll call him out. Richard knows when I mark somebody up. The city attorney, Sanchez, and I have met. He has not responded to the letters. We gave them a 20-some-odd page letter with an executive summary in the event you didn't have enough time to read all 20-something pages. Case citations, footnotes, everything you could want, no response. Crickets, as the kids say. We need to hold them accountable. And I think some kind of a broader meeting with a broader representation of our community is in order, demanding that we get answers to these questions that have been posed. They're fair questions to ask. Andy, what do you think?
Well, I was very proud when the number of Asian American organizations joined that evening at the City Council.
Yes.
We had, besides the Florin JACL, we had the Asian Bar Association stepping forward, Chinese American Council, API Queer Sacramento Coalition, and other folks joining together saying, these are questions, these need to be improved, and we need to work together on that. So I was proud of people stepping forward, but I think you really need to build that coalition.
Come on, I'm going to use that as the segue to our commercial, because Andy said something a minute ago, and he just made reference to it now, and we're going to have two versions of a song that talks about bringing people together. First, my man Michael Jackson, and next my man Jay King and Club Nouveau, both talking about coming together. And this whole question of multi-generational and intergenerational is so critically important. I know we only have about 3 or 4 minutes left before we have to give way to Eric Dostie, but what, as a prescription, Josh, would you say to all of our collective listeners that's important to keep in mind when we're trying to bridge the gap between one generation and another?
Well, I think communication and respect are two of the most important things. Because, let's face it, giving the youth some responsibility and basically telling them we believe you can do it is very important. And then to support them when they do those things, whether they put on an event, whether they have a task that they're working on, be supportive, be there, attend. And that way, you cross paths.
Wow, that's a big point. Hold on one second, Richard. I'm going to shout out to my sister Tanya Faison with Black Lives Matter Sacramento. And these gentlemen are nodding their head, Tanya, at the mention of your name. Tanya has said basically what my mama used to say: don't tell me you love me, show me you love me. And she used to say to some of us who work with Black Lives Matter, I want you to come out to our events. If marching isn't your thing and demonstrating isn't your thing, come to our picnic, come to our barbecue. And it's Richard and I have done some of those events and have been really well received, but your point is a beautiful point. Respect is something very delicate, and it's something that's earned, and being present is a big part of it. You got to be. Eric Dostie's nodding his head and giving me the thumbs up on that. Being present is important. Andy, what would you say to people who say, oh, well, I'll write a check, or come get me if something really kicks off, or I'm a little too tired to go out to the park and go to a picnic, or you're not serving my kind of food or whatever. But what would you say, Andy?
Well, I think it's important to show up.
Show
Be
up.
there.
That's
Gotta
right.
Show up there.
Show up and show out.
That's real.
Well,
listen, we got a call coming. Let me see if I can take it if they're still there. Yes. KDEE 97.5. Who's this?
This is Charles, one of your regular listeners.
What's going on, Doc?
One of my favorite shows that's
Thank you.
on Wednesday.
Thank you.
And I know that you got the mayor there.
We did have him here. He's left. We have some gentlemen who are here talking about a variety of issues of linking the African American community with the Japanese American community and broader. That's what we're talking about now. Do you have any questions for them? Have you had anything that comes to mind relative to them?
You know, Malcolm said we must be international, and I so agree with that.
I do too.
And me, myself, I believe if we can get international with all the talent that we have, we can change our community.
Beautiful point.
Maybe some of our college basketball players would want to go and play for China. Who knows?
Well, let me tell you this. I'm going to take this offline, Charles, because we're going to let some other call. Brother, thank you for calling, man. It's always good to hear from you. I just posted something I want you to look at on our Facebook page and also on our website. And we're going to take another call. But I want to take your point offline. If you'll keep listening, I'm going to respond to you offline, brother.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This is KDEE 97.5. Who's this?
Hey, this is Eddie.
I can't hear you too well. I can't hear you too well. Okay, there you go. Do you have a question for our guest?
Yeah, a question and a comment.
Okay, let's have both.
Okay. The question is, how do you get the children to get engaged and get 100% involved? Number one.
Well, so let me slow down. Let me slow down. That question's so good, brother. You may want to stop while you're ahead. That's a great question, man. That's a great question. Can I let him answer that one first?
Yep.
Go ahead. What do you guys say? That's a great question because even if we're well-intentioned, there's a big old generation gap between us. How do you do that? How do you accomplish what our caller just asked?
Well, that's a great question because it's not a question for someone out there. It's a question for the young people now. We're talking about them. We're talking about their family. We're talking about their community. And them being able to connect up and understand that and appreciate that, I think, is part of the motivation for them getting involved in things.
Beautiful.
So we try to connect up the history.
I think that's good.
Richard?
Mark, I haven't mentioned it yet because I'm still working on it, but one of our future shows coming up soon is going to be a show with just young people. And I'm going to bring a variety of young people because one of the ways you deal with young people is to listen to them.
Real talk.
You got to hear what they have to say.
In their voice.
Let them critique you.
From their mouth.
In their voice, in their mouth,
That's
because
right.
listen, they've got some issues they need to talk to us and some messages they need to send us, and we need to hear it.
I agree.
And
That's
so I'm going to bring somebody that's doing really well, but I'm also going to the hood.
Some folks
and
got
finding
some
somebody
challenges.
that's not having any success,
Right.
being stopped by the police often, doesn't have a job, education is poor. Well, I'm going to have that person on the show.
We're going to go. So listen, that was your first question. Do you have another question or you want to give your comment?
Yeah, my comment is like Richard said, show up and show out. But if you don't show up with a positive attitude, just don't come at all, because that brings a negative aura, and then that just defeats everything that you
Now,
want to do.
let me suggest a little something about that. I think that they used to say steel fortifies steel. I would say that's true, but more directly, I think that our young people mirror some of our behaviors. I really do. I think when we're sketchy, we can't expect them to be anything other than sketchy.
Exactly.
And it's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. What do you think,
It's an
Richard?
explanation.
Well, just remember when I told you that listen and silent are spelled with the same letters. Sometimes we need to shut up and just listen. And by the way, there's an old African proverb that we should probably close out with. God gave you 2 eyes, which means look twice as hard. He gave you 2 ears, which means listen twice as hard. And he gave you 1 mouth, which means talk half as much.
And in the case of the president, he gave him
Out.
one. He gave him one of a certain kind of a hole that we won't go into right now, because I'm not going to start talking about my president. Brother, thank you for calling in, man. We appreciate your comments. Thank you. Take care. All right, so we are getting close to the end of the show. We've got just about a minute before we move over and let Eric Dostey do his thing. Any closing thoughts you gentlemen have that you want to share with our listeners, particularly with our young listeners?
Yeah, I think if people want to learn, if they want to be involved, check out some of the things that's available through social media now. Check out the Florin JACL Facebook page, the Facebook page for Council on American Islamic Relations. The California Museum has some great exhibits, including the Black Legislative Caucus. It has a great exhibit there today. So those things are ways to get involved and learn more and get in there.
Andy, thank you. Josh, thank you. We appreciate y'all. We're going to stay connected. We do a wrap-up called 1 and 1. And today it's going to be the theater, since we talked about allegiance. Here's the question. Is it Allegiance or is it Hamilton? Which one is it for you, Josh? Allegiance or Hamilton?
Well, I got to go with Allegiance.
He's not going cultural here.
Well,
Andy,
Zulu, right?
Andy, what about you?
Same here. We've worked with George Takei and
He's the
putting
man.
that together
He really
and
is the
everything.
man.
He's
Yeah.
great.
Okay, what do you think, Richard? Have you seen
I
either
haven't
one?
seen either one. I need somebody to get me a ticket.
Let me tell you. Right now, Hamilton is in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Cheapest ticket's $800. So good luck with that.
See you later, Hamilton.
Yeah. What you think, Eric Dostey? You want to weigh in on this? You're going to pass it out, man. He going to pass it out. I'm going to tell you, I've not seen Hamilton yet because I ain't paying that $800. I've seen Allegiance. I think Allegiance is head and shoulders an amazing theater production. If you can see it, go check it out. If it's Wednesday or Saturday, it's time for Family Matters. We appreciate y'all listening in on KDEE 97.5 FM, the community's #1 radio station.